When it comes to Shabbat, a person has to understand. The Chafetz Chaim writes in regards to the Midrash on Masechet Shabbat, in page 10b, where Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I have a precious gift in my treasure chest, and it's called Shabbat. And I wish to present it to the Am Yisrael. Go and inform them. Meaning that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the gift of Shabbat to Am Yisrael even before the Torah. Even before the Torah. And Chafetz Chaim writes in regards to this Midrash that there are many different types of precious gems in the world, some which are literally priceless. Very few people have the means to purchase a large collection of such jewels. Even kings and emperors would find it difficult to obtain samples of every type of gem known to man. The more powerful the king, the more vast his empire is. The more likely it is that he will have a larger collection of rare gems. The Holy One, blessed be He, the King of Kings, has access to all the treasures of gold, silver, and jewels in the universe. But nevertheless, He does not take pride in any of these, and instead, He has a treasure, and He calls it Shabbat, which He called His precious gift. Clearly, it's impossible for us to conceive its true value, yet every Jew has access to this precious gift. All you need to do is observe the Shabbat. Everyone should be anxious to observe it to the very best of their ability in order to gain the largest portion of the possible of this precious gift. Now, here the Chafetz Chaim tells us that the master of all and the owner of all doesn't call everything his precious gift. He calls Shabbat his precious gift, and I'm giving it to you. A person that's wise understands that he needs to do everything possible to get as much of this gift as they can. The Rambam in Ilchot Shabbat, chapter 30, halakha number 15, writes that whoever observes the Shabbat as the halakha prescribes and honors it, and indulges in its pleasures to the best of their ability, will receive an abundant reward in this world, in addition to the reward set aside for him in the world to come. And in the merit of observing Shabbat, the sins of a person can be forgiven to the extent where our sages, Rabbi Chia and Bar Abba, says, even someone who was an idol worshipper, as people did in the generation of Enosh, through observing the Shabbat as the halakha dictated, will be forgiven for idol worship. That's how valuable Shabbat is. Now when you have such a treasure, and someone plays with fire, and says, sometimes he cares about it, sometimes he doesn't care about it, sometimes he treats it carefully, sometimes not so much. What does that mean? He doesn't understand how precious it is. And that's why the Rambam continues. The mitzvah of Shabbat is equivalent to all of the other mitzvot in the Torah combined. It's a sign of the eternal connection between the blessed Holy One and us. And therefore, anyone who transgresses any of the other mitzvot in the Torah is still considered a Jew. Even though they're a wicked one, nonetheless still a Jew. But someone who publicly desecrates the Shabbat is considered for all halachic purposes to be on the level of a member of the idol-worshipping nations. So when someone can go from gaining the greatest treasure Hashem has in this world, to now he's about to lose it, but not just lose it, turn into an idol worshipper, we now understand why the sages speak so harshly on the sinners. We now understand why Moshe Rabbeinu had to kill Tzlofchad for violating Shabbat and being the first Mechalel Shabbat in history. He killed him with the worst death penalty in front of everyone. The Zohar Kadosh says every Friday afternoon there's an announcement broadcast throughout every section of Gehenom that all of the suffering of the sinners has to be halted. But for those who didn't observe the Shabbat while they were alive, the fires of Gehenom are never extinguished. Meaning, if a person made sins and got themselves into Gehenom, but if they at least kept Shabbat, they'll have a break on Shabbat and eventually get out of Gehenom. But if a person died without doing tshuva for Shabbat, the fire never goes out. Not on Shabbat and not ever. The Chafetz Chaim elaborates further and says there are 4 different methods of halachic executions. The simplest one is chenek, which means strangulation. For the more severe sins, a person is executed by hereg, which is decapitation by a sword. But for the other, more severe sins, a person is executed by srifa, which is burning. But the most terrible form of execution in the Torah is reserved for the worst possible sins, which is skila, stoning. This punishment is reserved for the sin of desecrating Shabbat. The most terrible of all punishments that the Torah prescribes, Chafetz Chaim says. That means, Rabotai, a murderer gets lesser of a punishment than a mechalet Shabbat. They both get death penalty. But a murderer is considered less of a sinner than a mechalet Shabbat. There is an opinion from the Chachamim that a murderer still has a share of the world to come. Some say he doesn't. But some say he still has a share of the world to come. But yet, in regards to Mechalel Shabbat Befaresya, everyone says, across the board, has no share of the world to come. Why? Because Rachmanah said that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said he has no share of the world to come. Rabbi Yaron wrote this in Yarot Dvash, in chapter 2, section 3, that our sages taught in Masechet Shabbat, page 156a, that someone who is born on Shabbat, then he will die on Shabbat as well. But this is because he forced others to desecrate Shabbat to save his life when he was born. Meaning, if you're born on Shabbat, you have to violate Shabbat for him. He's going to die on Shabbat also. Why? Because of, he forced people to desecrate Shabbat for him to be born, and he's going to do the same when he dies. Now what happens if, so it's not ideal. It's not ideal. What happens if somebody dies right before Shabbat? Ben Hashmashot. And gets buried. The Ramban writes, and Chachamim concur, say someone that dies on Friday and gets buried Ben Hashmashot before Shabbat has such a high merit, there is no chibuta kevel. Meaning, he goes straight to the Beit Din of Shamayim. No suffering in the grave at all. Nothing. Why? Nobody violated Shabbat because of you. Shtabach Shimo. Now, the sages continue saying that someone that violates Shabbat is considered as if he denied the truth of the entire Torah and is given the halachic status of an idol worshipper. It doesn't mean that he's considered not Jewish and he has to convert, but rather he's considered an idol worshipper when it comes to how you treat him. So for example, if you have a Christian friend or other types of idol worshippers, and they see that you have an open bottle of wine on your counter and they pick it up, that wine, you're not allowed to drink it anymore. Why? Because one of the forms of idol worship in the past has been that they would give this wine to their gods. This form of idolatry. So we don't know if they just picked it up just to see the tag, or it was really a form of idolatry. We don't know. We can't trust them. We have to throw it out. You can't even give it to your dog. You can't sell it. Nothing. Not if the guy's an idol worshiper. He believes in Buddha. He believes in some cow. He believes in some human being. A precious Jew that turns himself into an idol worshiper by violating Shabbat, he touches your wine, you have to treat it the same way. You have to throw it out. That's what it means, treating him like an idol worshiper. If an Arab skilled at slaughtering. Skilled. If he slaughters your cow, tarif, not allowed to eat it. Not allowed to eat it. Christian, Muslim, atheist, some type of Buddhist, whatever they are, non-Jew. They slaughter your cow, your chicken, not allowed to eat it. Tarif. A Jew slaughters the cow. If he's a mechalel Shabbat, also tarif, not allowed to eat it. Why? Halachic consideration, idol worshiper. Not allowed to eat it. You had a wedding. You need 2 witnesses for a wedding. One of your witnesses is a mechalel Shabbat. Your wedding is not valid. Why? A mechalel Shabbat is not allowed to be a witness in a Jewish ceremony. Not allowed. That means that if you used a mechalel Shabbat as a witness in your wedding, you have to get married again. A person has to understand that here you have something that's the greatest treasure that a Kadosh Baruch Hu has in his treasure chest, and losing it doesn't just mean you don't have it. It's so precious to a Kadosh Baruch Hu that you forsaking it, chas v'shalom, is such a disregard and disrespect to him. It's as if you violated the entire Torah, which turns the person into an idol worshiper.